I've established myself as a top guy in TNA. Whatever might be next after that, I'll find out. TNA has given me countless opportunities to prove myself, but all about what's going to get me excited.
You're a free agent in February?
Yeah, free agency for the first time.
What else is out there?
That's a big question mark. I don't know what the next step is.
You are the shortest and also the longest reigning champion.
That's a true redemption story.
You never lost the title.
I wish I could have lost that title. A wrestler that I would love to wrestle is Edge.
You versus Chad Gable.
Has been brought up on Twitter many times.
Josh versus Gunther.
Almost happened on the Indies.
You and Moose.
Those are the two names that you'd like to see do something else.
There's no chance of you being in the Royal Rumble.
Never say never in the wrestling business.
It's the black eye.
Yeah.
You came in here with a black eye? What happened?
I got headbutted in the face on Friday. Yeah.
Oh, so this is a few day old black eye.
Yeah. It was a good one though.
But I mean, look how badass it makes you look.
I just get weird looks at the gym because I forget. And I'm like, why are these people looking at me weird? I'm like, oh yeah, my face.
Well, there's a funny thing, right? Because when you're in wrestling that much, you just kind of accept that as your norm. Mm-hmm. And then when you step out into like the real world, you're like, oh yeah, not everybody just walks around with black eyes all the time.
And for me, like it's been a constant over the past 3 to 4 years. Like it's either like a cut on my forehead or my eyes swollen shut or my nose is like busted. I've been kind of like my reputation in TNA is like, if he's not bleeding, he's not trying. Cause like I had a streak of like every major match coming to the back. Like my nose broke at BFG with Eddie Edwards. And like the next show, it was just like my lip was busted open. My eye was swelled shut. Like it's just a constant thing that happens with me. But I was on a good run for like the past 3 to 4 months, man. I came out unscathed. And then all of a sudden, of course, before I'm coming to do this, I get headbutted directly in the eye socket. So
that's a tough standard to keep up to, you know, if like you want to be bleeding every single
It's
time.
not that I wanted to. Yeah, I'm not that foolish, but I just have a thing. Like so many people, like they shy away from contact and stuff. And I'm like, I want this to look good. Like I'm not throwing my head into it so I get concussed, but I'm just like, you're not going to see me do this on a super kick. Like I have an ear padding with my headgear. So I'm always kind of like aim for this. And if I slip off and hit my eye, like whatever, but.
Now you wrestle in like a really like aggressive way. Like, I feel like if someone hadn't watched wrestling before and they watch a Josh Alexander match, they're like, oh, damn, like he really hates that guy.
Uh-huh. Well, it's kind of what I went for. Well, whether it was like a heel or a babyface, I kind of wanted to always be like, I heard William Regal say this thing in 2012 and I was there doing extra work and stuff. And he sits you down the first day at Raw and he just kind of talks to all of us. And he was just like, I think he was talking about Daniel Bryan. And he was like, that guy can do everything. He can make you laugh. He can make you cry. He can make you scared. And for his stature, it's like unprecedented for what he's able to do. Like he's obviously like, if not the best wrestler, one of the best wrestlers of all time, right? He was just like, but he doesn't sell tickets to the kids right now. He's the one that goes out there and wrestles a certain style so that the parents are going, oh my God, this guy's an ass kicker. Like that looked real. That looked legit. Like at no point in time are the parents going, that's phony. Like all this other stuff, you know, we're not coming back to this. He's making sure the parents that buy the tickets for the kids want to come back again. And like, that was the thing. And I was just like, it really kind of like resonated with me. And I was just like, that's kind of what I like to do and have been doing. So I'm just going to focus on that more. And it's just expanded over the past 10, 12 years.
There's something about the way you deliver that one punch. I mean, you don't need to peel it back that much, but how do you do it?
Well, it was a lot of practice, man. You're talking thousands of punches just to learn the distance and all this stuff. So you're not killing people. But my trainer, he would make us get out of the ring and punch the ring post. So I mean, it sounds barbaric, but it works. Like pain's a very valuable teacher. You either hit that post so hard, you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And then you understand like that's too hard. You're going to stiff somebody, knock them out, do something, or you get the timing just perfect. So like anytime, like I have the distance of like right now, I could punch you over the table and all you feel is like a little tap.
It's amazing. Like in the match with Ospreay, you came like running at him and like landed it. And I was like, that looked like a real knockout punch.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just practice makes perfect, man. Like I tell my students, even now at Can-Am and Windsor, like get out, punch walls. Like as your fridge door is closing, when you grab something, throw a punch while it's moving and try to get your distance down. Like, and like when I first did it, obviously I'm 18, 19 years old. And like, it looks like you know, remember Bloody Knuckles?
Yes.
This is like a barbaric game from when we were in high school
Yeah.
where you'd flip loonies and toonies, sorry, Americans, at your knuckles and see who was tougher. But like I had like little blood spots on my fridge door from hitting it too hard and stuff like that. And yeah.
I love explaining to Americans that we have a $2 coin in Canada. So why is it called a loonie? Well, there's this bird, it's called a loon, and on the $1 coin, there's a loon, so we call it a loonie. Oh, so why is it called the toonie? Well, there's bears on the toonie, but because it's two loonies, toonie. Oh, okay.
Yeah. It came out when I was like 7 and I never even questioned it until this moment when you're talking about
It's just, I get it. But I think here it's like, you know, there's something about like having the actual physical $1, $2, you know, dollars that you're putting out.
Yeah.
And when I go home, though, I always look at the loonie or the toonie, and I'm like, man, that's cool. Like, that's just cool that we have one of those things.
Yeah, vending machines are different in Canada, man. Like,
Yes, you can put a lot of coins into it.
yeah,
So where are you at? You're a free agent in February?
February 15th, I'll be a free agent. I mean, TNA announced they extended me, picked up my year extension February 14th last year. So yeah, heading into free agency for the first time.
How do you feel about it?
Equal parts nervous, equal parts excited. You know, obviously, like there's the one end of the spectrum where you're like, nothing might come of this. Like you have to be realistic. Like I have kids, I have a wife, I have a house I pay for and stuff like that. And like, you know, I can just do wrestling because I love it, because that's all I've ever really done. That's what kind of what's led me through this business the entire time. Just getting fulfillment out of it's the most important part to me. And as long as I get to do it at some level, I'm happy. Like I do indies still to this day where get tons of fulfillment, very happy to do it. And that might be it. I might just be doing indies, might be back doing construction to feed my family and stuff like that. But every so often you got to bet on yourself. And I just, what was it? 5 years ago, it was Santana's one of my very good friends, and he was finishing up with TNA at the time, Impact Wrestling, and we had an indie date, and he actually debuted the next night, but I didn't know that. He never told me anything like that. So we're just, you know, chilling out at the hotel. And I was just like, what made you like, you know, want to leave or, you know, really look at it as an option? Because he's very happy at Impact at the time. They were very successful, obviously. Yeah. And he was like, we just didn't know what more we could do. We've held these tag team championships this many times. We've had this many amazing matches with this tag team and this tag team. It's just like every once in a while, you got to think about what's coming next and what's going to excite you, because he kind of alluded to the fact that he hadn't been excited in quite some time. And I was just like, man, that really hits. Cause like now I'm thinking about my own thing. I'm just like, I've done so much in TNA over the 6 years. I'm very grateful for it. Cause like opportunities are like the one thing wrestlers need. And like TNA has given me tons of countless opportunities to prove myself and show what I can do. But I've also done everything and worked with the bulk of the talent that's in that company right now. So it's just all about what's going to get me excited beyond this point.
Well, your career's been so interesting because it's been about constantly leveling up. I remember for so long when you were the guy on the Ontario indie scene, when you were just like, I want to get a contract. Like that contract will make me feel like I've accomplished something, right? Yeah. So then you get a contract. And then you and Ethan Page as the North, they're like, I want to be one of the best tag teams in the world. Well, then that's part of the thing. You've leveled up to that. You're one of the best tag teams in the world. Well, what could I do on my own? Well, then you shatter records in TNA on your own. And it's like you're constantly like pushing things forward and leveling up. And it's just amazing that now you're at the stage of your career where like, what else is there out there for me?
And that's like the big question mark. Because like I don't know what the next step is. Like I've been ragged on it in the past for saying like I never had the dream of main eventing WrestleMania. And I know like, you know, Hunter himself has had the quote being like, if you don't want to be the top guy here, then you're in the wrong business. And it's not that I don't want to be the top guy or don't think I have the ability to be the top guy or anything like that. It's just, it was never my childhood dream. Cause like, I honestly never thought anything that I'm doing or have done was even possible. So this is all just like this amazing like trip I've been on the entire time. And it's just been setting little goals along the way. Like you said, like from, you know, I want to win this Ontario Indie Promotions World Championship to I want to get paid a certain amount to wrestle to I want that contract to kind of validate all this work and all this travel and, you know, running cars into the ground for little and no money to drive, you know, to Chicago and back in one night and make it back for work the next day and stuff like that. Like And then you achieve that contract and like all this other stuff I've been able to do. And now I'm sitting here going like, what could I possibly do next? That's going to be the next step. And it's just like, I need to grow, you know, my name. And like, I feel like I've established myself as a top guy in TNA, and, you know, whatever might be next after that, I mean, I'll find out and then I'll set those other goals.
If you've been watching for any length of time, you know that I love a good black t-shirt. There have been memes made about this, but I love a good, solid tee. And I've been on the hunt for a long time to find the perfect t-shirt, and I finally found it with Viori's Dream Knit collection. I mean, check out the Ponto Performance tee, a great fit, lots of stretch here as well. And I love how versatile this is, because it's something that, yeah, I could wear during an interview, but also something that I wear to the gym. And I don't know what you guys are expecting me to wear, you know, below here that you can't see on camera, but the Ponto Performance pants, oh my goodness. They're like the best lounging around the house pants, and you will never find me on a plane or in an airport wearing anything else. They are so freaking comfortable. They're super soft, lightweight. I love the relaxed fit, and they've got that 4-way performance stretch. Incredible. Viori is an investment in your happiness, and they're giving you 20% off your first purchase when you go to viori.com/CVV. Get yourself some of the most comfortable and versatile clothing on the planet by going to viori.com/CVV.
Well, if anybody's been watching you over the last few years, you're one of the best wrestlers in the world. So your options are wide open when February comes around. It could be staying with TNA, renewing there. It could be AEW, WWE, New Japan, or something else. Is there one way or another that you're leaning?
I would say no, just because I'm looking at everywhere right now. Like both my sons are wrestling nuts, Jet especially, my 6-year-old. So like Monday's Raw, Tuesday's NXT, Wednesday's Dynamite, like Thursday's Impact. Like I'm watching everything with my kids all week long, which is awesome because I get to share this passion with them. But at the same time, I'm watching the product going, you know, looking at NXT being like, man, you know, me and Ethan could tag up and we could face that tag team. That'd be awesome. Or like, you know, I'd really love to have a match with like Pete Dunne or Gunther, or, you know, the list goes on. And then you watch Dynamite and I'm just like, man, I've torn it up with Will and Takeshita in the past. Like I would sure love to do that on a bigger stage. And like one bucket list thing I might have, like a wrestler that's still, you know, out there wrestling that I would really love to get a chance to wrestle is Edge. He's an AEW, you know what I mean? And then there's Japan, where like Shingo's the one guy on my bucket list that like was like, this is doable. I'm going to make this happen. And like him and Ishii were like neck and neck, and I made the Ishii match happen. Shingo's the other one. So I just look at like the landscape of it, where I can go and where the talent is I want to work with. Everybody's kind of stacked, you know, roster wise, and like just, you know, to be able to tell stories and stuff like that with these people, like the options are all open.
What's it going to come down to? What's the thing that you're looking for whatever that next move is?
Probably just personal fulfillment, and like that. A bunch of things go into that. Like I love wrestling. I love the actual act of wrestling. You give me 20 minutes on TV or pay-per-view, I'll go out there and I'll do everything I can to make magic happen. So where the opportunities come, that's probably the most important part, right? But you know, obviously money plays a factor. Like I said, 2 sons, a wife. I need to upgrade, you know, where we're living because my kids are only getting bigger and more crazy and stuff like that.
And you're in a different stage of your life, right? You've got to think about providing for a family. Yeah. You're not a single guy who's out there and you're just doing it for you.
Yeah, yeah, and like I can't say that's not a big part of it. You know what I mean? But like, I'm just lucky to be in this situation where, like you said, come February 15th, like there's gonna be people that are interested in me, and we're gonna have to figure out where it falls. And like I said, TNA's not out of the conversation. Like I told them, I want to experience free agency for the first time in my career. I'm very grateful for everything we've been able to do over the 6 years. And like we've continued to do this year since they picked up my extension. But yeah, so it all comes down to February 15th, who's calling me and who's saying what.
Was there a certain moment in TNA where you went, I don't want to, I want to experience free agency. This thing happened and now I want to just see what my options are?
I wouldn't say one specific moment. Like the entire world title reign was like, I thought it was really successful. Like doing these pay-per-view matches month after month with these all sorts of different sizes and shapes of talent and stuff like that, and be able to tell these stories and have it well received by the wrestling community and fans. You know, that was something where I was just like, man, I'm getting somewhere with this. You know what I mean? I'm getting more confident in this, and confidence is everything with wrestling, as it is probably with your career and stuff like that. Like if you have people that'll fake it till they make it, and you can do that, and that'll only get you to a certain point. But like when you have that real confidence and belief in yourself and like know what you're capable of, I think that's where you really get comfortable, and then you can really show what you can do. And I fell into that during the world title reign, tore my tricep, all ended terribly, obviously. But yeah, when I came back, it was probably the 2 matches with Will, where like I'm looking at Will like this guy's the most over wrestler not signed to a major company like AEW or WWE right now, known around the world. And we went out there and, you know, instant chemistry, made magic happen, you know, highest rated match in TNA history for the second one, all this stuff that was well received. And that's where I'm just like, you know, if he's capable of doing this stuff, I'm certainly capable of doing this stuff too. You know, maybe not at the same level or whatever, but you know, that's where I'm just like, this is where I need to start thinking about free agency and looking elsewhere and maybe seeing what else I can do.
Did you feel like there was a time where you were, I don't know, I feel like you were like the best kept secret in wrestling for so long, and then something happened 2021-ish, maybe, where you just broke out and people were like, where's this guy been? It's like, well, he's been around for a long time.
I think it was the X Division run, mainly the Ironman match with TJP. That's the one I kind of credit with it. And I knew that going into it because I remember I was approached by, I think it was Artie Evans, you know, creative member of TNA at the time. And he said, we're thinking about doing an Ironman with you. And I was like, with who? Like, that's the first question. Cause I'm like, I'm in there for an hour with somebody. I want to make sure like this is going to be something good. And it's somebody I have chemistry with. And like TJP, I'm like, please, let's make this happen. You know what I mean? Because this is like, it's like the golden ticket. You know what I mean? Like you're giving me an hour of airtime on a wrestling program, how often does that happen? Like HBK Cena had it, you know, I think Kurt Brock did it on television, but like other than that, there hasn't been a ton of hour-long matches. AEW's done a couple as well, but like I just saw this as a golden opportunity to show what I'm capable of. Like not many people can go out there and wrestle for an hour and, you know, really captivate the audience, and to do it with no crowd as well was just like another thing on top of it that just compounded it. And I'm very proud of that match. And I know that that's like, whether it was the springboard for my name in the wrestling community being like not the best kept secret, it was definitely the springboard for management and TNA to be like, we can trust this guy with more stuff. And that's where the opportunities came.
I feel like people sleep on that match. Maybe because there was no crowd there?
No crowd. Weird, you know, piped in crowd noise here or there.
Weird era of wrestling.
I mean, certainly weird. I always said like it worked to my benefit because it seemed like wrestling was under a microscope during that time. Like you didn't have the crowd to distract from things that were happening in the ring. And one thing that I've hammered home the entire time of my career is I really want to be skilled at the fundamentals, from the punch, like you mentioned, to every hold you put on, the way I move. I want to make it look as legitimate possible as all times. And I feel like the crowd being sucked out of that kind of put the microscope on the in-ring wrestling even more. So that's like a reason why I stood out. So although I hated it, I'm very thankful for it because I think that helped.
When you're a tag team with Ethan Page on the indies for so long, then you get signed into Impact Wrestling at the time, you're the North, and then you guys have the epic run that you have there. How do you break out from being just a tag team guy?
It was tough, man. Like he kind of like, we taped our last tapings in I think November, and then he was off. And Hard to Kill aired with they pre-taped the whole I think it was the Karate Man thing that happened with him, and that would be my first show, that Hard to Kill broadcast. And I was not booked. I wasn't involved in anything. And I remember texting RD and Scott, and I was just like, hey, can I have a pre-show match on the YouTube show? And they were just like, you know, I don't know. I'm just like, in my head, I was like, more people are watching this free YouTube match leading into Hard to Kill than might watch Hard to Kill at the time. So I was just like, please, anything. And they were like, well, you probably won't go over. I'm like, I don't care. Just please put me in a singles match. Let me show what I can do. Me just asking for an opportunity. And they granted it to me. And I went out there with Brian Myers. We had a great match. He beat me with the roster cut, I think is what he calls the clothesline, you know. But I came to the back afterwards, and then I remember I broke my heel in that match. And like I was just iced out on the floor, and I had to wrestle the next day. And they were like, we don't know where we're going to go with you. What do you think? And RD asked me this, and I was just like, just book me in matches. Give me, 10 to 15 minutes per match with whoever. I don't care. And eventually, like, not a heel or babyface, I'll just get over as time goes on based on my wrestling. He's like, what makes you so confident in this? I was just like, I started an independent. That's what happens. And within 3 to 6 months, I'm their champion. Like, it has happened dozens of times over the past 10 years. I think it can apply here as well. And he was like, okay. So they booked me in matches, and I think it was like 3-4 months, I won the X Division championship. Right. So whether it was, building my name and getting over, because it was COVID, so you don't really know if you're over. I think it was more that I was getting over with the office, showing that I was dependable and consistent with these matches I could have.
Chew it and do it. What a catchphrase. I love it so much. Blue Chew is an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in a chewable form. The process is simple. Just sign up at bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And the best part about it is it's all done online, so there's no trips to the doctor, there's no awkward conversations, and there's no lining up at the pharmacy. Guys, Blue Chew wants to help you out in the bedroom. And that's why they're hooking you up with your first month for free. Yeah, for free. When you go to bluechew.com and you use the code CVV, your first month is free. You just have to pay $5 for shipping. All of the info is at bluechew.com. Don't forget to use that code CVV. And a big thank you to Blue Chew for sponsoring the show.
You are the shortest reigning champion, and also the longest reigning champion.
That's a true redemption story right there.
2-time champion.
Yeah.
Well, the first one was for 3 minutes. Is that right?
If that, yep.
So, how does it feel when they're telling you you're gonna trade in the X Division Championship, option C, right?
Yep.
For a World Heavyweight Championship shot, you're gonna win. You're not gonna hold it for very long. How do you feel in that moment?
I remember the phone conversation, and as I was speaking, I was like, oh, this all sounds great. Yeah, no problem. Cool. All this stuff. And you hang up the phone and you go, part of me was like, damn, man, I really wish like it wasn't like this. Cause like, I think I can do like some really good stuff, but like, I didn't see the forest from the trees or anything.
Well, you're also thinking like, what if this is it? What if this is the only title run I ever get?
Exactly. That's what it is. But like on the flip side, it was like, you're going to main event against Christian at Bound for Glory. And a year ago, you were in like a 4-way tag match here. You know what I mean? Like this, in a year span, you've gone from here to the main event against, an AEW, former WWE star, like TNA legend as well in Christian for the World Championship, like to be the TNA wrestler that brings it back to this company. So I was just like, absolutely, like this is opportunity again knocking at my door. So it's just like, that's cool. But I would be lying if I said there wasn't a small part of me. It was just like, man, like it'd be cool if like you didn't do this moose thing and I could just, show what I can do. Cause you never know if that's going to come back to where like, I didn't know that I was going to go on to beat Moose at Rebellion 6 or 7 months later. I'm sure management kind of had an idea to see how it would get over, but like anything can happen in wrestling. I could have gotten hurt, Moose could have gotten hurt and then that match would never have happened, or, anything could have happened that didn't make it transpire. But luckily, everything does happen for a reason, and we got there eventually. So.
It made fans hate Moose a lot.
I remember the day, like I got to my hotel room in Samstown and I checked Twitter and like, people are like clips of the match and saying, all these great things. And then they're just like hammering TNA for this terrible booking decision. We're back to the Vince Russo era, all this stuff. And I'm just reading. I'm just like, I mean, this is kind of nice because I guess they wanted me to be champion. But then,
it was this amazing moment with this beautiful arc. Like, Josh Alexander, like this pure wrestler. He's the guy. And then a few minutes later, what?
Yeah, Christian hugs me, raises my hand, puts the belt to my waist. My son and my wife come in the ring, and then
a beautiful moment.
The most dastardly thing that could happen happens, and I'm very thankful it did, though, for the way it all played out. Because
was there any sort of guarantee that, like, all right, I know this sounds pretty bad right now, but don't worry, we have a larger plan for you down the line?
I don't think I was told that exactly, but it was kind of like, we're going to see where this goes. Because like immediately, I think it was the next day, they were like, you get Suzuki the next day. And then it's going to be Jonah. And then it's going to be like, they just laid out 6 months of me working with monsters to try to get me over. And I was just like, cool. And they never said really 100% we're getting back to Moose, but like it was probably like 2-3 months into that. I think it was after the Jonah match at Hard to Kill. They were like, we're totally doing you and Moose probably at Rebellion.
And for people who don't know, we're talking about Bronson Reed.
Yes. I took 3 tsunamis and 3 sentons and spit up blood, just like you've seen Seth Rollins doing Raw recently. So
the official numbers, 335 days that you held the championship for. Is that the number we're going with?
I mean, that's the number that everybody goes with on Twitter. I think it's actually like 347 or something, because like the show didn't air until 12 days after it was taped, but I gave it up that, the 335th day of actually.
I mean, regardless, you're the longest reigning TNA World Champion of all time.
Yep.
Which is crazy when we run down the lineage of everybody who's ever held that championship.
Yeah, I have a shirt made that says longest reigning champion that I sell at Indies, and it's got like Sting and it's crossed out. It's got like Kurt Angle and it's crossed out. Samoa Joe and it's crossed out, and it's just Josh Alexander. I'm like, and I read it to this day and I'm like, Jesus, like I said, never thought any of this was possible. Right?
I mean, AJ Styles and like Bobby Roode and Bully Ray, and the list goes on and on and on.
It's completely insane to me, especially as somebody who ordered the very first Wednesday night pay-per-view, watched them religiously with my friends and stuff like that, and came up as a true like TNA fan.
Who were your TNA people during those early years of TNA?
Day one, AJ Styles, Low-Ki, and Abyss were kind of like the guys. I was totally in for something new in pro wrestling, especially at that time when there was one show in town. And as it progressed and went on, I was just like, man, Christian, Kurt Angle, like the Bobby Roodes, like all this stuff is just getting wilder and wilder. And we're adding names like the Machine Guns were in there. Sanjay Dutt was a guy I really like enjoyed watching. I loved Malice in the early days too. I thought Malice was awesome. You know what I mean? But it was just like all this excitement of somebody new in wrestling. Like I discovered Samoa Joe through TNA, and then I went back and bought all the Ring of Honor DVDs at my local HMV like we used to do back in the day, and like studied up on Samoa Joe, you know what I mean? So it just broadened my horizons on like pro wrestling in general, because TNA was this place that took people I'd never heard of or wouldn't have in the WWE bubble, right?
It also provided just a different style of wrestling. I was such a huge TNA fan, like 05 to 08, 09. Like just watching, there was things AJ Styles did that I just didn't think were possible.
Yeah, I can say the exact same thing, man. You talk about the Unbreakable 3-way all the time as kind of like the standard bearer for matches.
Yes.
And
for a long time, sorry to interrupt, it was the only 5-star Dave Meltzer TNA match.
And in my opinion, as a fan, should still be the only 5-star, because I don't think anything's ever going to top that for me, like as a fan watching. Like I'll
stop it. Your match with Will was incredible.
Yeah, but like, sure. But like, you got to think of like my eyes watching it as a fan are going to judge this differently, right? Like I watched Mike Bailey and Vikingo at BFG, and I was like, that's one of the greatest matches I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? I'll never watch my own thing and be like, that was great. I'll be like, why did my foot move like that when I did this? Or why did I grab him like this? You know what I mean? Like I'm just tearing it apart the whole time. But like you talk about that match and just the stuff they did in that match, like it changed my perspective of what was possible in wrestling. Like AJ Styles doing I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but he does like the crazy corkscrew
spiral tap.
Yeah, the spiral tap onto the pin, where he absolutely, like as a wrestler
break
now,
up the pin,
absolutely destroys Samoa Joe and Christopher Daniels. Like there's no way, like me as a wrestler now, I'd be like, yeah, they're dead. Like they're definitely like, that's not good. The springboard shooting star, like all this stuff, like, and like I talk about this stuff, and then you see interviews and like Will Ospreay talks about this stuff.
Yes.
Like that match has inspired so many people along the way, and it's because AJ Styles literally 10 out of 10 at every aspect of wrestling, whether it be high flying, striking, technical style, everything. Like probably the most complete wrestler across the board since Eddie Guerrero or Kurt Angle, in my opinion. Like,
but do you think now about the kids who are watching like your 5.5-star match with Will Ospreay and going, I can be a wrestler now because of that match?
I mean, yeah. So yeah, like I have to step back and really kind of look at it from like an objective view for that. But like when I do, I'm just like, man, I really hope something I'm doing along the way is going to inspire somebody, just like, Samoa Joe and AJ Styles inspired me when I was 15 and didn't think this was possible. Like maybe, because for me, it was like, I'm watching Randy Orton and Batista on one show being like, no way I can do this, guys. And then I see Low-Ki come out and he's like 170 pounds, but you do not for a second think that he can't go in there and kick somebody's ass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just the way he he did everything he did. And like the same thing goes for like the AJ Styles and the entire X division. Like you didn't question anything because they were so athletic and so good and so crisp. And that's what made me think this was possible for me. Really Samoa Joe, because I was a really big kid. Like I was a 300-pound kid in high school. So,
Really?
Yeah. And so like I saw Samoa Joe and I'm just like, this isn't a cookie cutter wrestler here, but like he's a badass and he can go. Especially like when his first match with Kurt Angle and stuff like that, you're seeing like the juxtaposition of their size and their presentation and stuff like that. And I never questioned it. And I was just like, maybe this is something I can pursue. And I never thought of a career, but I was just like, I can go try it for sure.
You were 300 pounds until when?
Oh, senior year of high school. So that's grade 12 up in Canada. Yeah.
And did you make a change at that point, or?
I asked my mom, it was Christmas time and I knew prom was coming up obviously in like 5 months. And I asked my mom to get like a dietitian for me because I knew I had no knowledge or ability to get anything done. So she did that for my Christmas gift. And I went down to like 250 for prom. But like this entire time I want to say like, I wasn't like a football player 300 or 250. Like I couldn't do a push-up. Like there wasn't an ounce of muscle on me.
What was the biggest change you made to drop those 50 pounds?
It was just understanding portion control and spacing out meals. So like I would probably eat the same amount, but before I was eating it in 2 meals a day, where now I was eating 6 times a day and splitting it all up. And just doing that, like boosted my metabolism enough to lose weight. And then when I moved away to university at Brock, I found out wrestling existed because I had something more than dial-up internet for the first time in my life. And I found a wrestling school. And when I started there, that's when, you know, the gym membership happens and all this other stuff to try to pursue this. But it never really got serious until, I don't know, maybe 2008, 2009. That's when I really dove into it.
Is there still a small part of you that thinks of yourself as a 300-pound kid?
There's a large part of me that feels like that. Like that's all I see in the mirror to this day. Like I'll tell my wife, like I'll be dressed a certain way and I'll be like, I can't wear this. And she'll be like, why? I'm like, you can see this and this. And she's like, there's nothing there. Like you have veins sticking out of that. Like, what are you talking about? But like, it's body dysmorphia. It's a real thing. Like I can't explain it to somebody that doesn't have it or hasn't experienced it. But like, I just look at myself and think that I look like the worst possible version of myself at all times.
Which is funny because juxtaposed to that, you walk around in your underwear for a living.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing to do, but like it's a weird, like maybe it's like a weird psychological thing where like I separate who like this Josh is from the Josh in the singlet with the headgear. Like I put that headgear on and all of a sudden I'm a superhuman. And that's where I feel like I'm indestructible. That's where I feel like all that stuff's possible and I don't think the same way or see myself the same way.
What's the approach that you have to putting a match together?
So I always want the perspective and opinion of my opponent first. So like some people will show up and they'll be like, I have this, and this, but that's without speaking to the opponent. And I've always like idolized guys like Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero and all these guys where I felt like they were kind of chameleons where like, if Eddie Guerrero was in there with a lucha guy, you'd see more lucha style. If he was in there with a brawler, he could go with a brawler like him and JBL or anything like that. Or if he was in there with a more technical guy, like he'd have crazy matches with Kurt Angle where they're not leaving the mat. They're just going around, you know what I mean? And that was the stuff that I really enjoyed. So I've always tried to be that kind of way. So depending on the match and who my opponent is, you're going to get a kind of different way of putting it together every single time.
But the approach that you have, it just feels, for lack of a better word, very authentic. Like it feels like you bring it.
Yeah. Well, I'll always have the intensity cranked up 10 out of 10, but like, it's always, the one thing I always try to do is to have things make as most sense as possible in a kind of a nonsense business. So like I will say like, I want to do this way because, you know, it doesn't make sense the other way. It doesn't look real. And they'll be like, well, does an Irish whip look real? I'm like, no, absolutely not. But like, come on guys, please, can we stop? You know what I mean? Like I always want, like it goes back to the William Regal thing I mentioned where he said, you know, you got to sell tickets to the parents that are buying the tickets.
Yeah.
Like I never want somebody to look at what I'm doing and be like, oh, that looked phony or that didn't make sense. You know what I mean? It's all about suspension of disbelief. So I really try to lean on making it as real as possible at all times.
When you got the second world title run, the first one super short, right? And that was what it was. Did you have any idea how long the second one would be?
Not a clue. Could have been 30 days, 60 days, whatever.
What kept extending it out, pushing it out? Like when you got close to the record, what made you the guy that they felt confident in giving that to?
I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to ask in this one. I always just chalk it up to consistency and dependability. Like I had been told by somebody, midway through that, they were just like, it doesn't matter who we put you in there with, you're always going to get the best out of them. And I was just like, that's a great compliment. You know what I mean? And that's what I run with. Like, I always try to have my opponent's best match possible. And I think that depending on my opponent gives me the best match possible most of the time. Right. I'm just trying to think. 'Cause I think Eddie Edwards, they had talked about him winning the championship off me at either the special before or on TVs and taking it from me and me winning it back at Bound for Glory. I'd heard that, and I think it was in Nashville, and I was just like, oh, that's weird. But okay, it doesn't matter. I'm not saying this to anybody. I'm just kind of saying it in my own head. And then I remember Scott saying something. I go, yeah, you guys want to give it to Eddie and then I'll win it back at BFG. He goes, no, that's not happening. And he just kind of shut it down like that. I'm just like, oh, okay. So this was like a discussion in the creative room that was kind of passed around and somebody liked it. And Scott was like, no, absolutely not. So I don't know if it was in his mind that they were going to go longer beyond BFG into this longest reigning championship, or if it was just something that kind of transpired. I think around the Bully Ray match at Hard to Kill, they were like, he's itching close. He's 40 days away from being the longest reigning champion. And they kind of looked at it. And I think that's where they decided it was Josh is going to take that mantle or whatever.
But you never lost the title.
No, I did not.
You had to relinquish it.
And it kills me every day, man. I wish I could have lost that title so bad.
And how much longer do you think you would have had it?
I think there was a good chance Steve Macklin was going to take it at Rebellion, which was 2 weeks or 3 weeks after I tore my tricep.
So you would have been so close to a year.
Yeah, I think it would have ended up 3 days short of a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That moment when you're relinquishing it to Scott and your son Jet goes and grabs it, what an emotional moment.
Yeah. My son is a fantastic actor. And you would think it's completely just happened that way and stuff like that. But I remember we had a talk with him in the back. Where it's if you want to, when I go to hand the belt to Uncle Scott, you can come grab it. And he was just like deer in headlights. No, this isn't going to happen. And I'm just there's no way he's going to do this, guys. And I remember my wife was walking him down, holding him the entire time in high heels. Talk about a Spartan woman. Okay. Walking on ring padding with a 35-pound child in high heels. But, and then if you watch, I don't even help her in the ring with because I'm out of it, dude. I'm in the ring. I'm depressed. I had surgery the morning before.
Wow.
And I flew straight from Orlando to Windsor the night before tapings. And I surprised my wife by coming back and my arm all slinged up and stuff like that. But I was fresh out of surgery. I remember they were talking to me about the promo and I was just I didn't take any painkillers, but I don't think they'd worn off from surgery still. Cause I was all pasty mouth and stuff and all this stuff. It was super strange. And I got in the ring and I was just so emotional. And I remember on the video clip, I walk in and behind me, she's trying to get under the bottom rope while holding him in high heels balancing. And people called me out on Twitter for it. They were just this man won't even help his wife and son in the ring.
What a heel.
And I'm just one of the biggest regrets of my career, man. Cause it was the one thing where you can point and be yeah, this guy is a dick, man. But yeah, we got in and as the promo was going on, I go to give the belt and I remember when she got in the ring after that, she looked at me, she's he's not going to do it. I go, okay, cool. Yeah. And when I went to do it, he just took off. This is my moment. You know what I mean? And he took it and it all went great.
I feel like I got so much more emotional now that I'm a father.
Yeah.
When that happened, I'm oh, jeez.
Yeah. Anybody with kids completely understands.
Yeah.
And then anybody without kids is the ones on Twitter that are just this is phony baloney, but you know what I mean?
Come on.
Yeah. You guys don't have the same feelings as us. Okay.
If you're wanting to burn some extra calories or sweat out some toxins from a particularly big evening of food and drinks and indulging, check out the infrared sauna blanket from Bond Charge. I've been using this since last year and I love how it raises your body temperature while you're just kind of sitting there relaxing, reading a book or watching TV. A session's usually 30 to 40-ish minutes and you can burn up to 6 100 calories in one session. I was looking into getting a sauna because I knew of all the health benefits associated with it. And I knew it would complement the cold plunging really well. I do it every day, like I start the day with a cold plunge and then right into the sauna, so extreme cold, and then into the heat. Then I saw the cost of a sauna, and an infrared sauna blanket from Bond Charge is a fraction of that price. And I think it might actually be better because you just kind of roll it out and crawl into it, kind of like a sleeping bag. It heats up in just a minute, and then you just let it do its thing. And I always feel so refreshed when I'm done with the infrared sauna blanket. Head to bondcharge.com/CVV to check out the infrared sauna blanket and use my code CVV. You'll save 15% on it. They've got free lightning fast worldwide shipping, and you're covered with a 12-month warranty. So that's bondcharge.com/CVV and the code CVV to save 15%.
You've had such a close relationship with Scott. And you talk about being given opportunities in TNA, and he was one of the guys who gave you a lot of those opportunities. Does him leaving TNA play a factor in you wanting to be a free agent?
Somewhat. Like when I first found out, he was like, "Oh, I teared up. I'm not gonna lie. Like I was thinking about these last 6 or 5 years at the time I had in TNA, and everything along the way from like when I started, having zero relationship with him, other than he was the guy that got me a visa and was giving me this opportunity, to this point where we developed this relationship of trust, and he coached me along and gave me so much help and put me with the right people to make sure that I was leveling up like my skills along the way, from storytelling and promos to in-ring wrestling and stuff like that. Just putting me with these certain people that he didn't have to, but he knew it would benefit me. And then leaving, like, you got to think, like, we were ride or die for this guy. Like the entire locker room was like, especially with the rebranding of TNA thing happening, at the end of BFG, and then the debut of TNA, we're like riding high. We just sold out the Palms. These shows were insane. Yeah. And then it felt like the rug was just pulled out from under you, right? So it's like, how do you react to that? How do you feel about that? And like the relationship we built, I was just like, man, I'm losing a mentor, and that sucks. But it's also the wrestling business. So like, I can't say like it's 100% the reason why I'm thinking about free agency. I would have thought of free agency regardless. And I kind of, Scott, when we negotiated my 3-year deal that I signed, to keep me there up until this February, he told me, he was just like, you're either going to be worth so much I can't keep you at the end of this, or I'm going to make sure you get paid to stay here. Like, but you're going to be worth much more because I know what you're capable of. And that was kind of like the thing we sat on when I signed that deal. It's
so crazy, bizarre, ridiculous to think that he was the guy who was championing TNA. Then TNA, we're effing back, right? That whole very passionate promo. Hard to Kill is incredible. And then it's like a month later.
No, it's like 2 weeks later.
2 weeks later. 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
He's gone.
Yeah.
And just from the outside looking in, it doesn't add up.
Yeah, and like that's a business conversation that is well over my pay grade, and I don't understand the inner workings of it from a wrestling perspective, from like, being the guy that has to be accountable for this roster and this production team and all this stuff, the ins and outs. I mean, I saw the guy work 20-hour days every day for years.
And he has another job on top of that.
Yeah, yeah. And like, I don't know how he does it. Like, I'm dead. From Monday to Thursday before I leave for shows, I am a dead body at home. My children take up all my time and energy outside of the workouts I have to do every day, and I'm just spent doing that. So I couldn't imagine. But like, it's wrestling, management, business, all this stuff. Bosses change, they come and go. I think like you can't say that like TNA hasn't done great things this year since the changeover. I was skeptical when it first happened. I had a meeting with them to talk about, maybe not picking up my option for the year, because I was just kind of uncomfortable not knowing, these new people that were going to be my boss and like what their ideas were. But they picked up the option, and like, you're talking about like record houses this year. Like, business is up, more people tuning in. You got the ascension of Joe Hendry coming in. The Hardy Boys are back, like tearing it up. Like, you can't say they haven't done great stuff. Like Ariel, Anthony, Gail, Tommy, this entire, new team that's kind of taken over since Scott left, they've done great too. So
one of the great things about Scott is he was able to wear a lot of hats. And like, he told me this great story of like when they needed to kill time, he would just go out there and cut a promo. And after your match with Ospreay, he was told like, we got like 4 minutes to kill. Go out there.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? So the match is over. You know, you guys are doing your thing after the match, and out of nowhere, here comes Scott down the ramp. What are you thinking? What's going on here?
No, I absolutely knew what was going on. As we're going home in the match, like the final like 4 to 5 minutes, in my head, I'm going, we're going early. 100% we're going early. And I'm trying to think of a way to communicate it to Will to like do something else so we can buy time and fill that time. And then we get so deep and the crowd's so hot that like doing anything ad-libbed would just sacrifice everything we've been building to. So I was just like, whatever, I'll cut a promo afterwards. It'll be fine. And like in my head, I'm just like, I'll cut a promo. I'll put over Will. I'll put over TNA, like all this stuff. Basically kind of the gist of what Scott did. But like we go home, we're sitting there. I'm about to like get up and ask for the microphone. Scott's music hits. He comes out and I go, this guy is stealing my thunder right now. Like in my head, because I knew it was happening, but I'm so glad he did because like I'm wearing long sleeves, but I have goosebumps right now just thinking about it, man. That guy got in the ring and off the cuff cut this insanely passionate promo that had me like welling up and goosebumped in the ring for how passionate he was about TNA being back. And just like the amount of like hype that was around these shows and how happy he was that we've gotten back to this point where because like he wanted TNA back for years.
Yeah.
And it was just like an uphill battle of being like, people are going to think tits and ass or something, or you know what I mean? Like it's a dead brand. And you're like, and I don't think everybody in the business side understood, like when I was crossing the border weekly to fly out to a show, I'd be like, I'm a wrestler. They're like, oh yeah, for who? And I'll be like, Impact Wrestling. I go, huh? And I'd be like, have you ever heard of TNA? And they go, oh yeah. Like the brand recognition alone, just based off the border guards was like enough for me to be like, let's bring TNA back. But
there were a lot of fans that didn't call it TNA or didn't call it Impact. It was still TNA for all those years to them.
Oh, I had to catch myself doing media for years being like, because like I would talk about the stuff I was a fan of and I'd say TNA, but then I'm only a part of Impact, so I don't know if it's the same thing. So yeah.
That match, by the way, it was on free TV. And it's available now on YouTube if anyone wants to go watch this. If you haven't seen it yet, that promo that Scott cut is included in that on YouTube. But like for that match to be available for free, you guys are too good to us.
Yeah, and it's a blessing for me too, because like that stuff's out there. It lives forever on YouTube and stuff like that. And like I think it's got like 700,000 views on YouTube. So like that's 700,000 people that may not have tuned in otherwise to see it, right? I get to see what I'm capable of, what Will's capable of, if they didn't already know, because you know he's the guy.
How is everybody able to make magic with Will?
It's a testament to him. And it's the same thing to like a lesser extent, like with stuff I've been able to do, because people have like been like, that was that guy's best match I've ever seen, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, you have to cater to people's strengths. And like when me and Will are putting the match together, we're on the same wavelength with a lot of stuff. And like the realism thing, all this other stuff, and just his formula for how he thinks of wrestling. It's so like, is neurotic the proper word? Like he's so like just devil in the details on all this little stuff, but it makes a difference. And it helps when you have this body of work that has gotten you over with the fans, so they're reacting the way they are. Because at the end of the day, we are out there for the fans. The more loud and into the match the fans are, the better our match is. You could have the best wrestling match in the world. If nobody's making a peep, it ain't that good. Like that's to me, that's the measuring stick for wrestling.
That tiger driver that Will Ospreay gave you through the table. It's tough to watch.
It was terrifying, to be honest. But honestly, Will, like, because like, I don't care. Like, I'll take the bump and I'll be like, this will hurt, but we'll get over it. Will is one of the strongest pound for pound wrestlers I've ever been in the ring with. He's deceptively strong. It's pretty insane. So there was no issues with me getting up for that or anything.
But if you'd previously broke your neck, are you not scared about moves like that?
Oh yeah, I did break my neck, didn't I? I forgot about that. No, yeah. So like when I came back from a neck injury in 2016, 15, something like that, I COVID ruined my like ability to remember years and time. Like it just ruined it. But yeah, when I came back for the first few months, I was wrestling and I was being very careful, trying to avoid anything where like I landed high on my neck or anything. I didn't want to get hurt again, obviously. And I ended up hurting like my shoulder, and then I hurt my elbow, and then I hurt something else, all because I was trying to work around landing on my head. And then I finally just said, you know what, forget it. I'm going to wrestle the same way I used to. And I'm just going to chalk this up to being just like a freak accident that happened, which it was. And I haven't looked back, and I've been fine ever since, man.
For people that don't know, how did it happen?
Ring of Honor.
It was here, wasn't it?
No.
PWG.
That was the second time.
Oh, okay.
First time was in Detroit. We did a Ring of Honor show. We opened the show. It was the Monster Mafia at the time, also known as the North, against Red Dragon. And for whatever reason that night, it was like lightning struck. I was the most over person in that building that night. That was the night Kevin Steen was having his final Ring of Honor match. He wrestled Steve Corino in the main event. And during the main event, throughout the entire show, they were chanting, "We want headgear." And like, I'm sitting in the back being like, I'm not signed here. I'm not part of the roster. Oh my God, I hope they don't hate me. I don't know if heat, blah, blah, blah. And like Adam Cole's coming up to me and like, bro, what did you do out there? I'm like, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And I never put it together that Rick Steiner's from Michigan. I'm wearing headgear in Michigan. Maybe that's what it was. Or maybe they just really liked my like Northern Light suplex that night or something, you know?
That's probably it.
But yeah, I took Red Dragon's finisher, which was a tornado DDT into the brainbuster kick thing. And on the DDT, it just crunched my neck a weird way.
Did you know?
No, I knew I cracked my neck and I was like, oh, there's not a lot of pain. And it was like 3 days later, I moved a certain way. And all of a sudden it was just like the hot coffee sensation and atrophy within a week. And of course it took me 12 weeks to get an MRI. Took me another 4 to get surgery. And I didn't tell anybody.
And you wrestled through it?
I wrestled until the surgery.
Oh my gosh.
And because Ring of Honor was talking about signing us at the time. And you got to think we're in a tag team as well. Like if I stop, there goes Ethan's opportunities as well. So I was just like, I can't do this to him again because I already did it a year before when I hurt my back. And there was like a lot of guilt on my end there for like having him, because that's when he did the Ethan Gabriel Owens thing. But anyway, I just didn't tell anybody. We came back and we got PWG and we're like, this is the next step. I'm like, when we debuted at PWG, I think it was 4 months post neck surgery. So I'm like, I'm through it. I'm good. I feel good. And then I took a powerbomb Meteora, like the knee drop thing while I'm up in a powerbomb, and I landed right on the back of my head. And everybody knew instantly. And I was like, no, I'm fine, guys. I'm fine. I flew home 2 days later again, hot coffee.
Oh, on the other arm.
Yeah, the first time was C5, C6. The second time was C4, C5. And so I'm like, they're like, you can't wrestle anymore, obviously, blah, blah, blah. So I did a whole retirement thing. I did a retirement show in Hamilton for Alpha One, Ethan's promotion. And then...
You can't wrestle anymore. But go have a retirement match.
I didn't tell them this part, but like for my own personal fulfillment, I wanted to like close out the way I wanted to against 2 of my best friends that I came up with since the very start in wrestling. They were called the Gym Rats, Alessandro Del Bruno and Scotty O'Shea. And we had this tag.
Was he the
match.
hacker?
The hacker, yes, sir.
I
I know NSPW is your
early days.
There you go.
He would hit people with a keyboard.
Yeah. I've taken many of those, but I had my final match with them, and I was like, okay, riding off into the sunset, you know, blah blah blah. And I came out of surgery, and they were like, oh, we didn't have to fuse your other level. It was just like debris and stuff from the first surgery that you kind of pushed around. It was in your spinal column, so we cleaned it up. But like, do 9 months of rehab, and then you can wrestle again.
You wrote an article right before going into surgery, right before your last match.
Yeah.
And it was titled, "Why I'm Walking Away from Wrestling." How difficult was that? Because you talk a lot in that article about like, yeah, you've wrestled all across North America, but you never got the chance to sign that contract. Like you felt like you still had more to prove.
Yeah. I tried to play it off like it wasn't that tough of a decision to make, that I was completely fulfilled with everything, because that's kind of the mindset you have to put yourself in when this might be your reality for the rest of your life, right? Like I didn't want to have regrets. And the problem being, when I came into surgery and he told me I could still wrestle, that's when all the regrets flooded in. And I was just like, you know what? I didn't work hard enough. I got by on my God-given ability and my aptitude for pro wrestling. But like, I wasn't dieting. I wasn't working out the best I could. I wasn't like putting the time into the other things that would make me, you know, an elite level wrestler to a point where like I could fit in with like the people I was working with. Like I would work with the Roderick Strongs of the world and these people, and everybody would know just by the eye test that they're the better wrestler. They just look like a more complete product. And like, I was fine being a big fish in a small pond. And when I came back from my neck surgery, after writing that article and stuff like that, that's when all the regret seeped in. And I was just like, I'm not going to have any regrets this time.
Do you feel like you have regrets now?
No regrets. Like everything now is like, it's like a pleasant surprise that I'm able to do all this stuff. I'm just happy to be able to wrestle still. And I mean, I'm more than happy to be able to do it at the level I'm doing it at. Like that's all just roses for me. But yeah, I can't think of any single regret I'd have now because it's all a bonus.
I want to read you this line that you wrote from that article. I'd found something to mold me as an individual, to make me feel like I had some value. Wrestling taught me that life was even worth living. Sadly, something I questioned on a few occasions in my life.
Yeah.
Is that how you felt at that time?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had like a real bad childhood with like both my parents struggled with addiction, 2 different homes. And they didn't like wrestling. And wrestling was kind of my safe space that I found. I never really made friends. I switched schools. I talked to my wife about this the other day. I switched schools 6 or 7 times between grade 5 and grade 9.
It's so hard being the new kid too.
Yeah. But like you're talking 6 times.
Wow.
Like you're talking 6-month spans in school. You know what I mean? Trying to make friends. And I wasn't very good at that anyway, to begin with, as like the fat kid wearing the DX shirt. You know what I mean? But like, luckily, by the time it all settled in grade 9, I found wrestling, wore that t-shirt to school, and I found another guy wearing a t-shirt. And I was like, hey, what's your name? And then all of a sudden we're best friends and we have this group. And like everybody else in the school might think we're losers, but us 5, we're a group, and that's my community. And then when I left there for university, I discovered wrestling school. And when I went to wrestling school in the Ontario indie scene, I discovered a community, like-minded individuals. This is a safe space for us to like, you know, develop relationships and share this common bond. And that's kind of been what wrestling's been the entire time. And I was lucky enough to find my trainer, Johnny Devine, and, you know, a barbaric man by wrestling standards for wrestling training and stuff like that. Yes, because he came up in the Hard Dungeon as like a 5'6" dude. So he was getting stretched and beat up every day. So when he trained people, like that's kind of what he did. But it made me who I was, and it made me really respect wrestling, and it made me kind of become a man. Because when I was 18 and I went to university and I started wrestling, I didn't have any idea of what the value of $1 was or any work ethic really. Because like I said, coming up in like a terrible household, I have no motivation to better myself or do anything. I'm just trying to skate by and survive most of the time, going to see my dad on weekends and survive that and stuff like that. So wrestling was the one safe place I've always had from when I was like 14 or 15 on. And when I retired, like, man, saying that, like, I haven't read that since I wrote it and posted it, but like, I'm just like now having kids, watching them trying to maneuver. Like my one son's in grade 5, trying to maneuver social situations and stuff like that. And there's struggles at times.
Yeah.
He has long hair. People try to make fun of him and ask him, you know, if he's a girl and stuff. And he comes home upset sometimes, but like he's developed this thick skin now where he's like, I don't care. I like my hair. And we're like, yeah, you can look and act however you want. Like, just whatever makes you happy. Like for me, like I needed to find other people in wrestling. And that's something that's like, just like follow me along. And just to hear me write it like that, like, that's obviously like a cathartic thing that I wrote out that entire piece, right? Like, I have to go back and read it now that you wrote that you read that out because, yeah, I forgot a lot of it, but it's all true.
Where's your life at if you don't find wrestling?
I don't know. I don't think I'd be anywhere near where I'm at right now. Like as a 37-year-old man that owns a house and has 2 kids that make sure that his kids are happy, safe, and all this stuff at all times. I wouldn't have fallen into drinking or addiction because I've always just learned from my mistakes of my parents and family members that fell into that along the way. Like I have 2 stepbrothers who are now both dead from drugs and alcohol.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And they went that direction. I find that people either gravitate to going the same way or they go the opposite.
They run away from it. Yeah.
I was luckily that I ran away from it, but without wrestling, I wouldn't have had that work ethic that made me kind of be able to survive over these past like 19 years since I was 18. So
if wrestling's the thing that's driving you and pushing you and it's at the center of your life for your whole life, what did that moment mean when Scott came out to the ring with a contract?
I mean, it's validation for me 100%. But on the other end, it's like me showing everybody that ever said I couldn't do it. Like it's kind of sticking it to them. And that's the thing that really like made me proud of that moment. Cause like same thing, my stepfather and an aunt of mine, I found this thing like a few months ago and sent it to my uncle, but they were going back and forth on Facebook talking about how they saw a poster of me in my old town for a wrestling show and they were ripping me apart. for being like 30 and like, oh my God, look at that tan. He looks so unhealthy. Like they obviously edited the poster wrong and like they washed me out or whatever, but like, so it didn't look great, but like they were just ripping me apart for being this guy that just would rather play on weekends and do this wrestling thing than actually be serious and get a job.
What was the job you had before wrestling?
I was in construction. I was making, $60K a year, working 50, 60 hours a week, but like, that's what I had to do to survive. And like, I always had this work ethic to provide for my wrestling habit, and then later on to provide for my family. But it was just this weird thing where like, I really, when I got that contract, I thought about that being like all these people that said I couldn't, here it is. Yeah. I did it. And to my wife and stuff like that like when we got together, I had been retired. Like I returned to wrestling after we'd like had our dates and stuff like that and got together. And she never signed up to be with a wrestler. She's in the business, luckily. She understands my passion for it. She understands all this stuff. But she had this talk with me where she's like, I didn't think I was getting into this. Because like, I thought you were done. I thought I was done, all this stuff. And I was just like, okay, so is this like a deal breaker? And she was like, no, absolutely not. I'm super happy about it. It's just, it took me a minute to be like, okay, this is what I'm into now. You know what I mean? And she's really happy it happened, obviously. But yeah, I don't know what life looks like without wrestling. It's just the only way I can say it.
Was there a difficult shift when you thought that wrestling was over for you? Like, because that's your identity, right? You go from being wrestling fan to being wrestling trainee to then being independent wrestler.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it's taken away from you. There has to be an identity shift of like, who am I now?
My son was born like 8 months before I ended up retiring from wrestling. And I just, with an absent father growing up and stuff like that, I just really wanted to be a dad and make sure I was always there for my kids and made sure that they felt safe and happy at all times. So I was like retiring thing, that identity crisis, I'd already shifted into being dad. Like before you call me a wrestler or anything, I want to be dad. And now I'm dad, husband, then wrestler. Like these are the hierarchy of the importance in my life that I need to concentrate on, because I grew up watching people make mistakes on those first two, husband and father. And I always want to make sure that my kids don't have that same, life I had.
Are you looking at these next few months between now and February 15th as just like a proving ground? Like it's almost like you have an incredible resume, but it's like now you've got a chance on TV to show your worth. Like, if we're going to subscribe to the idea of you're only as good as your last match, you've got the ability to have a few of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Like, the debut of MLP, the second night I went main evented with Takeshita. I certainly looked at that as a job interview for AEW.
And this is Scott D'Amore's new company?
Yeah, Scott D'Amore's new company. Yeah, first shows were in Windsor. You can get them on Triller, I think it's called now. Sorry, it's changed names a couple times.
It's Triller, yeah.
Triller, yeah. I started out, I opened the very first show for him, in the Canadian versus the world 6-man tag, a la kind of harken back to Flying Elvises against AJ, Loki, and Jerry Lynn. That was kind of the booking idea, even though it probably wasn't that good as that match, because I put that match up on a pedestal too as a TNA fan. But and then I bookended it by having a main event with Takeshita, and we went like 32 minutes or something like that. And it was just like, I looked at that as a job interview for AEW. I was just like, if anybody from that company is watching this is one of the best wrestlers you have in your company. I want to show that, I can make magic with this guy. And that's the same thing for everything I'm doing in TNA. I wrestled Joe Hendry in September, and I was just like, this guy's on NXT right now. I'm sure somebody's going to be paying attention to it. I'm going to make sure that they know that like I can have one of the best Joe Hendry matches and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So like everything, I look at every match I have as a job interview to a certain extent. Like this is all building upon itself, and like even smaller stuff like the indies. I'm wrestling on an independent in a week called Northern Crown in Toronto. It's the only booking I'm going to have in Toronto before I become a free agent. It's the last one. And Gabe Sapolsky's going to be there, for his WID program thing, just watching local talent in Canada. And like, I want to have a really good match with the Canadian kids I'm wrestling in hopes that they might get this WID thing that might help them get a visa to be able to, wrestle more freely and stuff like that. So yeah, you're only as good as your last match, but I like the pressure. I like the pressure of that.
I don't know if that's a thing.
Like, I don't think it's a thing, because I think like I was at Ric Flair's last match, and I don't think that was his greatest match, but he's still one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, you know?
Like when people say you're only as good as your last match, but then they're like, but Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels is so good. Well, yeah, but that was like 15 years ago.
That's exactly what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
Like Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio is the greatest match of all time.
Yeah,
you know?
Rock versus Hogan. Like, you're only as good as your last match, but WrestleMania 18 was the best match ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, some things live forever as like the greatest thing you've ever seen.
And I
right?
think about that, like, oh, you're only as good as your last game. Yeah, tell that to Freddie Freeman. Like, game 1 of the World Series is going to be the moment of his career forever.
Yeah.
Like, I think that, like, I can understand that, like, wanting to get better and, like, wanting to look back at your old stuff with a critical eye and improving on it, but I don't know. I don't know if I subscribe to that.
I think it's a really good saying, but
It's a great saying.
yeah, it's catchy.
It's a good saying.
But I don't think I agree with it. No.
Not only did you have a match with Joe Hendry, you also got the full Joe Hendry treatment.
Oh God. Yeah.
Does he set up for you like this is what the song is going to be about?
No. So I had been ripping apart Joe on Twitter pretty heavy, like just trolling him because like I'm the wrestler's wrestler guy, right? So I'm just like, this guy's the complete opposite of me. I'm just gonna play into this and lean into it. And so like I'm like making fun of him. He like puts up a thing saying like, oh, NXT's been great. They have me down to the Performance Center training every day. I'm like, you need more training, dude. Like blah blah blah, like whatever. And we go into that TVs and it's before the TVs and I go up to him and go, so what do you got? And he goes, I don't know. I kind of looked at you and I was just like, what do I really make fun of him about? Like there's not much. And I go, oh, you'll find something, dude. Don't worry. And then like I watched it live. I didn't want to know because like I wanted to be out there reacting on the spot. Like with my promos and stuff like that, I find if it's just very like off the cuff rather than like predetermined and premeditated, I'm way better at delivery and stuff like that. It's more natural. People enjoy it more. So I watched it live and I'm just like holding back like this son of a bitch, man.
You kept a straight face.
Yeah, it was tough. I was biting my lip pretty hard, but
Kurt Angle from Wish.
And that's the line right there, man. Like you can do the Walter White thing all day long. That's fine.
You kind of do look like Jesse Pinkman a little bit.
Oh, I get okay.
I can see that.
Thank you, but I
He's
mean,
a very successful Emmy-winning actor.
But the Kurt Angle from Wish thing, that was August, and I'm still hearing about it today. So for better or for worse.
While that is, he's making fun of you, that's also an incredible compliment.
Yeah.
You're in the same sentence as Kurt Angle, one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah. I mean, I've never looked at it that way. You're making me feel a whole lot better about it right now.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah, I'm the Temu version of the greatest wrestler of all time. So that's pretty good. Yeah.
I mean, come on.
I mean, I do German suplexes and an ankle lock.
I think it's the ankle lock.
Yeah. I've thought about getting rid of it.
Did you have to talk to Kurt Angle and say, I'd like to do this ankle lock?
So I was doing like a half crab at first. Like I think if you watch that Myers,
like Lance Storm,
that Brian Myers match, I do the rollback half crab, Canadian crab in that match.
Canadian Maple Leaf.
Yes. And then somewhere along the lines, it progressed to an ankle lock because there's way more ways in and out of it to make your match exciting. And then Ken was at TNA. Oh, that's what it was. Ken was there and I went up to him and was like, hey, I heard this is your last day. He goes, yeah, it is. And I go, is it okay with you if I use the ankle lock from now on? He goes, oh, absolutely. Yeah, you do it great. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, cool. Got his approval. And then I did Kurt Angle's podcast like a year and a half later. And I said, hey, man, I asked Ken, I got to ask you, now that you've watched one of my matches, is it okay if I use the ankle lock? He's like, you have my blessing 100%. You do it properly, all this stuff like that. And I was like, sweet, awesome. So I got the stamp of approval from the two guys that are best known for the ankle lock, right? So maybe I can't get rid of it. Now you've just talked me into this.
You can't get rid of it.
I thought about getting rid of it because I'm just like, too many people just compare me to Kurt Angle because I wear a singlet and do an ankle lock. But if you watch us like wrestling wise, like I don't, other than the Germans, there's no other thing in my moveset that I think, crosses over. But
I think it's just the intensity.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like the pure wrestling that you bring to it. But I mean, that's a pretty great comparison.
Yeah. It's me and Kurt up there. Chad Gable, obviously.
I think Chad Gable's the only other person doing the ankle lock right now. If I get this wrong, I'm sorry. But,
yeah.
But then Chad Gable gets the comparisons all the time as well.
Yeah. I think you're just stuck in that situation if you're a good wrestler in a singlet too.
You versus Chad Gable.
It has been brought up on Twitter many times. I've seen it in my mentions a few.
I mean, How good would that be?
I mean, I went through like a wave on Twitter with this NXT TNA relationship where people were like, we need Josh versus Obafemi. We need Josh versus
Sure.
Chad Gable.
Okay.
And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm like, yeah, sure. Bring it on. All this stuff. And like, I heard rumblings that like,
Josh versus Gunther.
I mean, it almost happened on the indies several times and got shut down.
That was
too.
Walter.
Oh yeah, this is different.
Different.
You're right.
I mean, physically looks like a totally different
He's
person.
60 pounds lighter. I have a better chance of being able to throw him somewhere. But yeah, I heard rumblings that the NXT thing was going to happen on a couple occasions. There was stuff that like was legitimately talked about, and for whatever reason, it didn't transpire, and that's unfortunate. But like, I mean, you never say never in wrestling business, right?
Well, with the relationship that TNA had with NXT, we saw Jordan Grace and we saw Joe Hendry, we saw some others. Everyone was throwing your name out there. It was you and Moose. They're like, it's just a matter of time, right? That we're going to see them.
Well, I think me and Moose are kind of like, for especially the men's division side of things. Like, I think we're the two. Like, I was the face, the heart and soul of the company for like 2 years. Moose has been the one constant over the past like decade.
Yep.
Now in TNA, like he's the longest tenured guy there. So I think those are the two names that kind of stick out in the men's division that you'd like to see do something else. Like, if not me, like especially Moose, because you've only seen him tangle in this kind of playground in TNA for so long, right? And I think the thing with this relationship, the thing with AEW New Japan is like, from a fan's perspective, this is what we want. We want to book dream matches and fantasize about like things that we never otherwise thought possible, right? So I'm super grateful. I get into it like all the time when I read my mentions and something happens and all of a sudden it's like, we need Josh Alexander, Chad Gable, and it's like, fuck. Just my Twitter going crazy. I'm like, well,
just wait till this interview comes out.
I'll keep my fingers crossed, bro. I think we tear it up. But like, there's a bunch of guys like on Raw and SmackDown that I was just like, I would just love to be able to wrestle these guys, like Ilya, like Braun Breaker, Seth Rollins. I've never wrestled.
Oh man,
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You go through those, and obviously like Bronson Reed and stuff, we've shown that we can have awesome matches. And then like I watch Dynamite, and I'm just like, they're stacked too. You know what I mean? And it's just the wrestling business is an interesting place. It's gonna be fun for me on February 15th, I guess.
When I see you do the C4 spike, I'm just like, it's man, it's devastating. Mm-hmm. Do you not think, as a guy who's broken his neck twice, that there's a real irony in doing a move that looks like you're breaking someone's neck?
Yes, of course. But also I have the one thing where like, if they're hesitant to take this move, I'll be like, listen, I broke my neck twice. There's no way I'm ever hurting anybody's neck. So you can trust me.
So you feel confident that you wouldn't hurt someone with a move like that?
I've done that move over 1,000 times.
Wow.
Nobody's ever complained any bit about it. And it's a testament to a few things. I know how to execute the move to make it look good. Like a slight bend of the knee helps elevate their head so it won't hit the mat. If you see somebody do a pile driver and lay their legs straight like this, that's your head's hitting for sure.
That's a pure ECW pile driver.
Yes, exactly. So a slight bend of the knees and a little lean back on the tailbone, and everybody's safe and happy, and it looks devastating. Like I did one to Alex Shelley prior to BFG the year before I wrestled Christian to put him out of that tag match at the very start on the stage. And I guarantee like his head was 1/4 of an inch off the ground. But that's how confident I am in giving that move. And to go into this, I was wrestling at Slammiversary this year in like a 6-man war. Ziggler or Nick Nemeth, Joe Hendry, Frankie Kazarian, Steve Macklin, me, Moose. And Joe, obviously this is where I do the turn. I low blow him and I give him the C4 spike and eliminate him and kill everybody's dreams in the world of believing in Joe Hendry, right? And
Wait, you don't believe in Joe Hendry?
Not an iota, okay? But like before the show, Joe was kind of like, oh, I've never taken the double underhook pile driver, all this stuff. And he's like, and I can tell, like I'm reading his mind. I'm like, he's doing NXT. He doesn't want to get hurt. He's terrified of getting hurt because he's got all these opportunities coming up. And I'm just like, Joe, I'll tell you how to do it. Like I walk him through how to hook his arms so he keeps himself up and safe. And I'm just like, and I'll pick you up and just go up like a vertical suplex. Like, let me pick you up right now. And I hook. And this is before the show. So like the ring's just like all these wrestlers are around like, oh, I'll do this moonsault, blah, blah, whatever. And I'm like, hook, okay. And now tighten up and I'll pick you up and just go straight. And I go up and his ass comes right here. And he goes. Directly in my mouth. What? like the cutest little, like a kitten farted, and it came out of Joe Hendry, and it went right, and it was like, and I just like drop him like a sack of shit. And everybody in the ring, for how quiet it was, like literally it was just, and for how quiet it was, everybody in the ring's just on the ground laughing hysterically. And I look at Joe, and Joe's crying because he's like laughing so hard. And he's like, I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry. Oh my God, that's embarrassing.
This is how scared he was. He almost pooped himself.
The most adorable fart hitting in the back of the throat.
When I saw you give the C4 spike to Moose, like Moose is a big guy.
Yeah.
There's just an extra layer to it, an extra element of like you're getting someone that big up, and it looks even, I don't know, more devastating.
Yeah, and Moose's head is enormous, so I really have to bend my knees to make sure he doesn't hit.
And then you gave him one through a table on the outside.
Yeah, and that killed me. That like I couldn't walk the next day. I had a New Japan show the next day, and I flew there not being able to walk, and like somehow wrestled the match. But as long as I can hook my hands, if I can hook your arms and hook my hands together, there's no chance you're gonna get hurt.
So if someone's really big, you might not be able to do it to them.
I just don't.
Okay.
Because like
how are you gonna get your arms around Bronson Reed?
Yeah, we tried. He was like, maybe if you do like the thing, like the London Dungeon thing, where you take me off the top rope with the feet thing, and I was like, no, man, I'm not confident. He was like, no, it'll be fine. I'm just like, no, dude, like,
please don't.
If I have a question of if your head's gonna hit, I don't want to do it. I don't want to hurt anybody, so I just like ankle locked him. But
it's crazy. If you go to WWE, you might be able to do it. We recently saw a Piledriver there.
It was a regular Piledriver is pretty devastating. So mine would be like a completely different animal. I mean, or if I go to AEW, I probably can't do it because 17 people do it there. So like, I don't know what's going to happen.
No,
man.
of course you can do it there.
I mean, yeah, but it might be kicked out of like once or twice before I go out. But maybe it's just mine that's super impressive. But yeah, that's all stuff like I'm thinking about too, leading into free agency. Like, where could I go and what would I have to change and stuff like that? Because obviously there would be like an evolution of what Josh Alexander is too.
What do you think you'd have to change?
Well, you just want to be different. You want to stand out, right? Like I wouldn't want to do pretty much any moves that anybody else does just to make sure I stand out. I know MJF does like my powerbomb on the knee move I do. I've seen Kenny and Will and some other people do the double power. I think Kyle Fletcher just did it too. So like that would have to change. I think somebody's already doing an ankle lock in AEW. So I might have to change everything. But I'm okay with that.
If you're saying February 15th, there's no chance of you being in the Royal Rumble.
I mean, unless TNA and their WWE relationship works something out.
I guess anything's possible.
Yeah, we can do that all day long.
Anything can happen in the WWE.
And you never say never in the wrestling business, all right?
But it's February 16th?
February 15th.
Oh, so
Valentine's Day is my last day.
Okay.
Which is weird, but yeah.
It's romantic.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that line from Moneyball? Something about getting romantic about baseball. Feel the same way about wrestling.
There you go.
How can you not get romantic about wrestling?
Well, I'll just be an anxious person on a date with my wife that night, I guess.
Are you anxious?
Yeah, well, like anxious, I said, nervous, excited. You know what I mean? Like to me, I have had to bring myself to the fact that I might just be doing construction again. Because I always want to think worst case scenario. I have learned over 20 years in wrestling to never think of the best case scenario and never like count your chickens before they hatch or anything like that, because you'll be let down the majority of the time. And I've learned those lessons the hard way, so I'm not doing it this time either.
But if there was ever a good time to be a free agent in wrestling, it's now.
I've been told that by a few people as well. Like I hired representation now, so like I have agents and stuff like that working, and we'll be doing all this for me, which I'm super grateful for, because that makes this so much easier, because they know way more about it than I do.
Yeah.
But they've said the same thing. Like AEW just got their television deal. WWE last year at this time, when I had my discussions about maybe not picking up my option, like they were in a holding pattern because like management was shifting and the restructuring of like the whole TKO merger acquisition thing. So like now kind of the dust is settled and all that stuff, and both companies seem to be doing really well. So it seems to be a good time.
You've got options.
Yeah.
What do you think that Bully Ray match did for your career?
I think it showed people a different side of me that they otherwise would not have seen working with, you know, I did great storytelling and great promos with like Eric Young leading into Slammiversary like 9 months before that. Same thing with Alex Shelley at Emergence a few months later. Same thing with Eddie Edwards going to BFG. But like, until it's somebody that has this clout in the wrestling business of being one of these people that does this, you know, has done this at the highest level with the biggest names, I think it's just a different thing. And like, Bully worked with me very, very, it was tough at the start. I don't know how to really say it other than that. Like, he kind of was standoffish with me, and I don't know if it was that he wanted me to buy into his gimmick more in like a backstage perspective, but he was also very helpful at the same time because he's all about storytelling, and that's what we do at the end of the day, is tell stories. And the stuff I learned just in that 2.5 month span leading up to that match at Hard to Kill is stuff that I'll take with me forever. Like just like a pre-tape. So a pre-tape is like a promo with no audience, right? And you're just talking to a camera. A lot of times they feel flat. And for me, I was struggling because I'm just like, I can't, like, if I go out there in front of the crowd or if I have a wrestler in front of my face, completely different story. I have no problem like just delivering that like it's a real thing. When it's just a camera, that's where I struggle. And Bully like pulled me aside. He was like, you look at that camera and all you see is me. He's like, you see me peering at you and you want to give me a 1,000-yard stare to make sure that I'm intimidated by whatever you're saying, that I know what's coming to me, all this stuff. And it just like the way he said it, I was just like, oh my God, how did I not just think about this like all the time? So now every time I cut a pre-tape, like I'm picturing whoever it is I'm talking to as the camera, and it's like helped me tenfold, and it's improved my promos so much. But that, and like I kind of had a chip on my shoulder with that because like the greater wrestling audience on Twitter and social media was like, this is going to suck. Bully's the worst, blah, blah, blah. He's over the hill, all this other stuff. You know what I mean? And I was just like, no, this is going to be awesome. And like, I think you put like Bully Ray Hard to Kill title defense I had up against anything I did in that title defense. I think it's neck and neck with some of the best matches I had.
Was there a moment in that match when it really clicked, or a moment just working with Bully that really clicked?
I would say it was in the match, and it was probably when I ended up getting zip tied to the top rope. And I saw my wife came down to the ring from like the audience to like kind of get in the way because she kind of been sprinkled into the storyline here.
And this was a very hardcore match for anybody who hasn't seen it.
Oh yeah, I'd already bumped in tacks. I'd already
cheese grater to your face.
Yeah, I had tacks in the back of my head and stuff. And I'm zip tied to the ropes, and like he just said, "Come in and beg me off." And they did like a beg off thing for like 2.5 minutes as I'm trying to like rip myself off these things. And he's like, give me your wedding ring. And she was like, what? No. And she's just like, they didn't talk about this prior, anything that he's saying. And like, she's reacting and he's like, yo, you give me that ring right now. Cause blah, blah, all this stuff, like making her beg. And I'm just like, this guy's like, and the crowd's going insane with everything he's saying. He just keeps upping the ante along the way. And I'm just like, you got to be able to go to that place. And it takes an insane amount of trust from your opponent to like, let you do that and stuff like that. But at the same time, like I told Bully I have all the trust in the world for what he's going to do. I'm very grateful that we got to work together. I wish we could have worked together longer because I would have learned so much more, I think. But
I don't get how cheese graters work. You don't need to explain the magic here, but I watched them and I'm like, man, when I nick my finger when I'm grating cheese, I'm like, ah! You guys are taking this to your forehead.
I don't understand the magic of it either, to be honest. That thing was touching his forehead the whole time.
You like rub it down his forehead. But you were bleeding a lot too.
Yeah, I was bleeding off like I think the first thing he did. I can't remember, but yeah, then that was the first time I did tacks. Like you think about my entire run throughout that world title reign, I had shown really kind of one note of me, just really badass wrestling, hard hitting wrestling. And sometimes really technical wrestling, sometimes like working with a high flyer, it's like just a more fast paced wrestling. And I wanted that match to be different. Like I had talked to them after Bound for Glory and I was just like, you realize I've never done a gimmick match here. And like, what do you mean? I was just like, I've never done a gimmick match here. Like any stipulation other than Ironman, which I don't think is really a gimmick, guys.
It's a long match.
Yeah, it's just long. And they were like, well, you don't need one. Like other people need it to have like better matches. Some people are protected with, you know, the ability to use tables and stuff like that. And I was just like, okay, but think about how much better my match could be if we had that stuff. And they were like, okay, we'll give you probably for Bully, we'll give you Full Metal Mayhem. And I was like, thank you. Oh my God. Yes. Cause it's just like, it makes it like as brutal as that match was so easy for me to do. Cause like, it's just moments. Hardcore matches are just moments that you split up. There's no like transitions of like, and you're not getting blown up, having to like, not that I get blown up a lot, but like, you know what I mean? You're not like really pressing yourself from a cardiovascular perspective to like keep the pace up and stuff like that, because you have these huge moments with these huge payoffs where you get to relax and sell and tell a story with the facials and stuff with the camera. So
do you feel like you have to prepare more or less for a longer match? Because there's this quote, I'm just going to paraphrase, but like, if you have to give if you have to give a 5-minute speech, it might take you 2 weeks to like figure out, all right, what are the few things I want to do? I have to pare down. But if you have an hour-long speech, you're like, oh man, I have the freedom to now do whatever I want.
I've never heard that, but that's exactly how it is for me.
And I feel the same way about these interviews. Like if we only had 4 minutes together, I'd be like racking my brain for weeks. Like, what are the 3 questions I'm going to talk to Josh about?
Yeah.
We get an hour plus like this. We can just hang out.
Yeah. The conversation always leads itself to being a much easier interview, right? Like,
sure, yeah.
But like same thing with wrestling for sure. Like I don't think there's anybody in the world, I don't care how good you are. Like, I don't care how many 5-star matches you have or something. If you have an hour-long match, there's no way you're remembering an hour of content for your match. If you can, all the power to you. I haven't met that person yet. But like, for me, I think an Ironman match is the most challenging match stipulation there is for you to challenge yourself as a pro wrestler to see if you're capable of doing this, because you can plan 20 to 30 minutes of stuff, and then after you run out all that stuff, that's when you're going to find out if you can really do this. And that's the stuff that sets you apart. That's putting yourself in uncomfortable positions when you do it on pay-per-view or on TV where you have time cues and all this stuff to hit, right? And I'm thankful that I've gotten opportunities to put myself in those uncomfortable positions, but I for sure spend more time obsessing about an 8 to 10 minute match than anything. Like if you give me 20, 25 plus, I'm breathing easy, because I'm just like, we can just make magic happen out there for most of this.
Like, do you feel confident? I'm sure the answer to this question is yes, but if you were wrestling a 10, 15-year veteran and you had a 10-minute match, could you call it out in the ring, the entire thing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, as long as, so I've had this happen a couple times where I've worked on short notice. Somebody got hurt and they're like, Josh, can you go out there? I'm like, cool. And I'll just be like, what do you do? And they'll be like, super kick, pile driver, moonsault, suicide dive. And I'll be like, okay. And I'll go out and I'll be like, that's fine, because they're all in my head right now. And I'll do this, and this, suicide dive, and I'll fall out the ring. Oh, there he is. Boom. All this stuff. You know what I mean? And like me and Nick Nemeth did an Ironman match. That was probably the least amount I've planned for an Ironman match that I've ever done. Maybe 15 to 20 minutes of it was planned. Everything else was just us walking and talking. And I'm wrestling this guy who I have a ton of respect for, you know, and I'm just like, he's called matches with John Cena. He's called matches with Randy Orton. He's just like, where they're just going out there and be like, see you out there, kid. And like, that's all they do. And I'm just like, I'm gonna see if I can do this shit too, you know, whatever. And we get out there and we're telling each other stories the entire time, just talking. And like half the stuff, we're like not even calling spots. We're just like, you okay, Dad? How's this going? Blah, blah. Oh, I think it's going great. You know what I mean? And the crowd's none the wiser. And I'm just like, this is wild. But it's a lot more fun that way too. Cause like when it hits, that's when you're really like, you fell upon something, as opposed to putting it in the back, obsessing over it. And then you go out there and it doesn't hit. And you're like, oh, what was all that work for? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, as we sit here right now, it's 3 months away.
Yeah.
It's 3 months till you're a free agent. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. I'm excited for you, and good to be able to catch up with you. Yeah. And congrats on everything. A ton has changed since I saw you in person last. And I just want to say congratulations on everything you've done.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Obviously, I'm very happy to see that you're flourishing in the wrestling community with all your interviews and stuff like that. I love watching them. So
I'm trying. Send all your friends over here. we'll bring them all on.
All right.
I'll end this with the question I ask everybody. I don't think we did this last time you were on. Gratitude's so big for me. Mm-hmm. Josh, what are 3 things in your life that you're grateful for?
Well, first I'll say health, because, you know, I know a lot of people that aren't in good positions of being in health right now. My friend Chris Bay is in the hospital 20 minutes from my house right now, you know, dealing with a neck injury. And that really puts it in perspective, you know, it could happen at any moment. Family. This family I've built over the past 8-9 years, just something I never thought possible. I'm just like, I wake up and I'm in awe of like just having this thing, and just to be in the position I'm in where I can provide for them and stuff like that, and make sure they're happy every day.
That's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And it was just like, it's the stuff I don't know if you did this because you've only recently had children and you're at a different point in your life than I was. But when my first son was born, I didn't know how I was going to get my next paycheck sometimes, or how, you know what I mean? And just to have that pressure and that anxiety weighing on you, and then to be in a position now where you don't, that's...
I feel it's still like do my own thing. So the start of every month, I have $0. Like I have a good idea of what might come in, but it's not like every 2 weeks I've got a paycheck.
No.
It's like, I've got a little girl at home and another baby on the way. And it's like, like there's a real sense of like, you've got to make some stuff happen here. And I had a moment that you're kind of talking about. Like I just woke up the other day and I said to my wife, I'm like, what a beautiful life we have. Like, that's just reminded me of what you were saying there.
Yeah. Like I have people in my life that are like complainers, and they like to just dwell on the negative and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, this is this way, this is this way. I'm like, like there's millions of people that don't have fresh drinking water right now somewhere in the world.
And that's why I love to focus on the things that I have rather than being upset and angry about the things I don't.
Mm-hmm.
It instantly changes your perspective.
Yeah. And perspective is everything.
Yes.
Like that's one thing I've definitely learned as I've matured over the years. Third one, man, I mean, my wife and kids kind of encapsulate family. Health is really important. I mean, I'm grateful for opportunities, the ones that I've had before and the ones that I might get in the future. I think that's a good way to sell this off at 3 months coming up. So
puts a perfect bow on top of this. Well, good to see you, man.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Well, we'll see what happens in a few months.